Okay, I'm just checking on my phone to see if we're live. Okay, we are. Awesome. Look at that. I'm actually a minute ahead of time. I'm early for once. Okay, so if I can just come back to Zoom to get that on my phone. Okay, so good evening, everyone, and good afternoon for those of you that are watching from the US. I've got to remember the time difference. Thank you for joining us here. I just want to make sure that I've got the capacity to see everyone's comments. So bear with me. Oh, there's an echo. Hang on. I will get the text sorted, everybody. Just bear with me. There we go. Right, let's try that again. So good evening and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here. If you are with us live on Facebook, please just either give me a thumbs up or just drop a comment to let me know that you can hear me okay before I crack on and we begin the awesome interview and live with Tammy. Let me just check if everything's going okay. Okay, so I have the immense pleasure of having a live session tonight with the wonderful Tammy Billups. Now, I've got a really great introduction for her, and I can't tell you how riveted I am for this session. So I came across Tammy when I was watching somebody else's live on Instagram, and somebody mentioned her Animal Soul Contracts book. So if you don't have it already, peeps, you have to buy it. I have recommended this book to so many clients and on my courses. It is amazing and it will change your world, but more on that later. So Tammy also has another book, which we're going to cover. So she's got these two awesome books, Soul Healing with Our Animal Companions and Animal Soul Contracts. Now, Tammy is an award-winning author of these books. And she's also a pioneer and international teacher about the animal and human emotional and energetic partnership. So Tammy created a method called the animal-human tandem healing. So she's able to work with humans and with their animals to help them heal together, which I have to say blows my mind. And I'm definitely going to be looking into doing it with Leo because, you know, you guys know from being a part of my community that I believe that we are connected with our cats and they have lessons to teach us. And Tammy is all about raising awareness of this. She's about raising awareness of the higher purpose of the animal relationships that we have. But also the point that we wanted to talk about tonight is that, you know, our cats have wounds. Our cats have, you know, things that we need to help them with, of which Tammy will, I'm sure, explain much more eloquently than I am. So without further ado, I would just like to welcome Tammy and say thank you ever so much for being part of this live tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Julianne. It's lovely to be here and talk about one of my favorite topics, kitties and emotional wounds.
Excellent. Excellent. So let me just check the volume there. So let's start off by asking you, how on earth did you get into this? How did you, figure out that you could help people and their cats to heal?
Well, it wasn't a fun journey necessarily, but I would say that I've always had cats. Well, I say always. In my 20s, I got my first kitty. As a child, we weren't allowed to have animals in the house. So I get kitties because I traveled a lot, and I thought, they're a little bit more independent. So, but my animals and me were always through my 20s and 30s, and I did the corporate, climb the ladder, like I said, travel all the time. And my kitties and I were always quite ill with one thing or another. And frequently my kitties were mirroring my exact physical ailments. So if I got asthma, my kitty got asthma. If somebody got a UTI, I got a UTI. And I remember thinking at the time, because I was quite unconscious, I wasn't aware of the bigger picture or any of this. And I can remember thinking at the time, oh my gosh, this can't be just a coincidence. It happens repeatedly. And then the year that I turned 40 was the year that everything shifted for me. And that's been a long time ago. I'm not going to say how many years, but I through my mother's loss, and then I had this spiritual awakening. And 3 weeks after my mother passed, my first kitty, Kalua, passed. And it was harder because, of course, our animals are with us 24/7. My mother and I had, we saw each other twice a year. Of course, I missed her, but, it's my first pet, my first animal. And I can remember I learned so much through my mother's passing, because I wasn't raised with any religion or heaven, or I didn't have any beliefs. And so my mother had started talking to people that had passed before she transitioned. And I just was like, wow, this is so cool. There's this other side. There's people greeting her. And so, and my thoughts when Kalua was passing, I was crying and screaming to heaven, and because mother hated cats, so I knew she didn't necessarily line up to greet Kalua, right? So I was like, there's nobody to greet her. Let her come back and live with me. And that night when I went to bed, all of a sudden I felt her soul. And then I was able to see her soul. And then I was fascinated with that as well, and started kind of honing my abilities. And that just took off. And in fact, it opened very wide, probably a little bit too quickly. And then because I had reached that point of awakening that my soul had longed to and wanted to, my other two cats transitioned within months later, and they were 6 and 8 years old.
Oh, Tammy.
I know. And now it's easy for me to look back and just send them gratitude, because they held a lot for me. They carried me through a difficult time before I was able to say, hey, I need to work on healing myself. And so, but once I started working with animals, I think finally getting to answer your question. Once I started working with animals and doing this work, because I found someone who did energy healing, and I was on 8 medications at the time I started seeing her that I thought I'd be on the rest of my life. And within a year or two, I was off of everything, and all of the symptoms of these things had disappeared. And guess what? My cats were magically healthier, right? Because of course I got more cats, right? So I immediately thought I want to do, this is what I want to do. I want to help people. And so I went into training for a 4-year certification on how to help people heal through healing their emotional wounds and clearing them through the energetic field. And within the first, few months of doing it, I thought, I wonder if this works on animals too. And I started asking my friends if I could help just kind of tap into their animals and help them. And the results were quite amazing. And I had one girlfriend who had a horse named Maxie. And Maxie was limping with this condition in her back leg. And Andrea really wanted Maxie to give birth to one foal. It was just her dream. She wanted to have one foal in her life. And the vet said she will never be able to give birth. She will never be able to run. She will never be able to walk fast even, And after 2 sessions, Maxie started running, and she gave birth a year later, and I mean, that's just one of the examples. But then to take it one step further, when I would connect to a person's animal, and I would see their energy, and I would see which emotional wound was up for healing, if I panned it all or tuned into their person had the exact same emotional wound.
Wow.
So if the animal had abandonment, then the person had abandonment. And then things just kind of took off from there. That became kind of my niche, because I thought, I tried to find, I'm like, surely I know that I'm not the only one that's discovered this, but I couldn't find anything documented about it that would help me on it. So I did lots of case studies. I did lots of notes, and just started developing in kind of honing my practice through helping people and animals heal together.
Wow, that is fascinating. That is absolutely fascinating. And I am so sorry for all of that loss that you experienced. I can't imagine how soul breaking that was. But like you said, from that, it's almost like a phoenix, like analogies come into my head, you know, from all of that sorrow and sadness came this amazing opportunity to connect with your soul purpose and find out, you know, how you were meant to help others, and how you could heal animals and humans together. I mean, I find that magical. I don't know, I can't think of a better word than magical.
It is. There's so much magic around us all the time, but it really was. And I love the Phoenix image. I think that is what it was. You know, I was coming into my soul's true self.
Which can be clunky, right? And a little bit painful when you're trying to do that. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned about your age. I'm not far off 40. And, you know, having left my corporate job last year, very much I am stepping into my power of, you know, I'm here to help people with their cats, you know, and coming across people like yourself and some of the others that we've had doing lives, you know, it can be really painful, you know, in terms of your growth. But actually, when you start to realize what you're here to do and how you can help others and be in service of others, and then find out you can heal and help, it's amazing, isn't it? You know, it's truly kind of liberating in a way.
It's extraordinary. And I say it's not for the weak, for sure, to take going within, because I still am on a deep inner healing journey. I don't think we ever end, but I went through such a period of being physically sick so much. And then I also, like, I never cried back then. I thought people who cried were weak. And now I cry all the time. And I'm like, feeling is so much better than not feeling. Even if you feel the bad, it's okay, because you get to feel the good in a way that you never even knew was so extraordinary.
Definitely. And I love that as well, that you were very honest about that, about crying, you know, because I think, dare I say it, there is this kind of perception, especially of women, you know, being emotional. And actually, you know, my grams once said to me that when you cry and you let the tears out, you let more emotions come through, you know, you can feel even more. And I just think that that's, you know, we should be embracing our emotions, and even especially the tough ones and the hard ones and the dark times, because that's where you have the most capacity to grow, right? And to, you know, evolve from that as well.
Yes.
So let's talk about the books, because I have both the books. I have both the books here. And as I mentioned, I have read this one. I've got notes, I've got folded down corners, you know, I've got double underlines. I'll be honest to everyone, I haven't read this one yet. And that is because I am saving it. So I take a week away twice a year, no husband, no Leo, no phone, no computer. And it is just time to reconnect with myself, to figure out where I'm going and how I'm kind of traveling along. So I've saved this one for that time, because I want to sit down, I want to be present, really, really present, and digest it and understand it. But I know that what we've pitched to people tonight that we're going to talk about is based in this book. So it's kind of like a teaser for me as well, you know, as I head into October and go for my retreat. So this is the first one, and Animal Soul Contracts was the second. So before we talk about the emotional wounds, tell me a little bit about kind of the order of the books and how they are here to help people.
Yeah. So I wrote Soul Healing with Our Animal Companions to share that foundational work that I discovered, that how much our animals and my cats were mirroring me, and the different ways that they can mirror you, and you know, details behind separation anxiety and all of the 5 core emotional wounds. It's the foundational work for, if you get this level of awareness with your animals, it can be life-changing for your health and theirs. You know, and as us animals, I was really motivated that when I saw that I felt better, that my cats felt better. It's like that motivated and inspired me to say, okay, I need to look within, because it affects everything, affects my animals. And I don't want them to be in any type of suffering, let alone from my fault, you know, from myself, you know. So that book really goes into those. I coined different titles for each core emotional wound. betrayal, abandonment, invasiveness, terror, and denial of self. So those are, and I gave different titles for them. And I get into every single emotional wound and how to identify them within your animals, what traits they might be exhibiting, how to help them heal that emotional wound, steps that you can take, documented steps. And then, of course, throughout the book, there are client case studies, stories to show how there's some, as you know, in animal soul contracts as well, but I give examples of how this might be showing up within your animal, and then how to help them heal from that.
Yeah, lovely. They sound quite hardcore, I'll be honest. The titles that you've given them, they sound very I don't want to say dramatic, but like intense, I think is probably the word I'm searching for. They sound intense. So can you explain to me a little bit more about how you developed them, how you came across them, and why you decided to call them those titles that you gave?
Right. Well, those are actually the core wounds, but the titles I gave them, the sensitive one, the protectors, the perfect one. Oh no, I'm going to lose it. The perfect, the perfect one.
I do the same thing with my book. When someone asks me a question, I'm like, 40 profiles, I think.
Right. Well, remember that 4-year certification that I went through with people? Well, those were about the 5 core emotional wounds within people. So which they had different titles. Of course, the core wounds were the same, the betrayal, the abandonment, those were the same, but they had different titles. And then there's others that I could find that have written books. Barbara Ann Brennan has written books, Light Emerging, about the 5 core emotional wounds. There's several books out there for people. And so I've kind of adapted what I saw as the traits within animals for when I saw that in their energy field of it being up for abandonment per se, then I was able to kind of translate, so this is how the person's saying that their animal's acting, right? And their behaviors, and of course I had my own cats that are always my best teachers, through thick and thin, of course. So that's really how I, so it was easy as I knew that there was an abandonment wound. Well, it was that the animal was acting very needy. So I called it the needy ones.
Right.
And invasiveness always, because it has, the person and animal will have boundaries that have been, invaded upon. So they're more sensitive because they're feeling everyone else's energy. Right. And they're going to be, a little more cautious around being with people, especially kitty cats are going to be under the bed a little bit more, but not terrorized. It's because they're waiting to see about the energy of the person first, and to decide whether or not they could, potentially be invasive in any way. Invasiveness, doesn't have to be physical or, some really big trauma. For people, it can be having a parent that over controlled them. That's invasive.
Yeah.
And it can create a sensitive profile. So there's more healers that are birthed out of invasiveness wounds than any other wound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned to me when we had a chat, didn't we, before we decided to do the live, I was talking a bit about Leo, and you said to me, he sounds like a sensitive one. So I'm particularly keen, I'll be honest, to hear more about you, from the horse's mouth, so to speak, about that in particular. So what does that mean? How, in your opinion, do you think I could help him?
Well, tell me again. I'm so sorry, I don't remember. So and that might help. So tell me again about, there's probably some reason why I said that. So tell me about his personality and behaviors and whatnot. And then
okay. I feel like I'm putting you on the spot, but you're doing great.
That's fine.
So he is asthmatic. I'm not asthmatic, neither is my husband, which I find quite interesting because she's about the mirroring of health. So he's asthmatic. When the doorbell rings, he will run away. When we had him, he'd been in the shelter for 3 months. He was about 18 months old. He was previously feral. So he was captured, he had his ear tipped and as when he was neutered. But if anybody comes to the house, he runs out the back. And, when we, for example, go to the vets, he hides. So his defense mechanism is to hide away and to be in a dark cave somewhere. So behind the bed, under a blanket. When it's him and I, this morning, 4:45, he's on my pillow. I've got my head in his tummy. He's pretty much curled around my head. he is very, very loving when he chooses to be, and only pretty much with me. So my husband will even go to stroke him, and Leo kind of ducks, underneath the stroke. My husband's desperate for cuddles and attention, but Leo is, like, no, thank you. So yeah, I mean, from my behaviorist perspective and my, being an empath and an intuitive, I know that he's, guarded and is trying to protect himself, but I'm super interested on like your take on it, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, I'd love this. This is what's going to help people that are watching. So yes, he's definitely exhibiting signs of having previous invasiveness. Right. And that's where he's more guarded, right? So whenever there's a kitty cat that has more invasiveness in their background and they're acting more sensitive, like it's not safe for me to be out here and I'm going to pick and choose what I want to do, giving them permission to make those choices and accept them where they are is perfect. Pulling them out from under the bed, of course, which I'm sure you don't, but I mean, just letting people know, but trying to pull an animal out from under the bed and say, look at how pretty my kitty is. He's shy though. That won't ever work. No. But one of the things that really helps with sensitive ones is that I believe is with kitties that they are teaching us acceptance of ourselves, because of course, and I'll put you on the spot now, with you calling in a sensitive kitty, that means that you're a sensitive soul as well, right? Mm-hmm. And so sometimes when we can look at them and not see what we wish was different in them, but accepting where they are and saying they're laying out their own boundaries and it's okay. Mm-hmm. And looking at him and saying, buddy, somebody's going to knock on the door. You may want to get to your safe place. Mm-hmm. And then when he peeks out, you want to say, oh, aren't you brave? Aren't you courageous? And you let him do that. And my kitty Mai Tai was a sensitive one, and he was my little soulmate for 18 years. He just passed 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because he was always run and hide, always, always, always. And he could sense everybody's energy, as I'm sure Leo is. And of course, I'm a sensitive one with a lot of invasiveness in my background. So we were two peas in the pod. But once I began accepting myself, then I could accept him where he was. And sometimes then when people would come over, I would see him peek his head out from the bedroom. And I would say, you're courageous. I see how courageous you are. And I just kind of forgot about it, right? And I would just let him know that he's safe. And at the end, when I remember I had like a housewarming when I moved in this home, and it was maybe a year before he passed or so. And when people came over, they said, he was just out in the middle of 15 plus people, and people said, this is the friendliest cat I've ever met. And I just looked at him and nodded and thought, okay, so he's come this far. That means I've come that far, right? Because he's letting me see me in all of my glory and all of his glory too. So you want to just really be patient with them and allow them to make choices, because a lot of times they were, you don't know what happened to him before, right? Right. And so you have to assume there's some level of that. But of course, there's like attracts like. So you guys are on this beautiful healer journey together. The sensitive ones are always have the capacity to be extraordinary healers.
Mm-hmm. You touched a nerve, I'll be honest, when you said about, he's really sensitive, so you must be sensitive as well. I was told by an old colleague that once that, oh, you're so emotional, you're so sensitive. And it's always stuck with me. And isn't that interesting? Just in this moment, talking it through with you, I look at Leo and I wish with all my heart he wouldn't be so nervous. He would be more kind of confident and not be so scared, from life. And actually, like you said, I also share with people, try not to don't ask for your cat to be a cuddly cat. Don't put expectations on your cat, accept them for who they are. Yeah, now I'm playing this back to you. I'm like, really should practice what I preach, because, there is me wishing that he wouldn't be as fearful, but actually he is exactly where he needs to be. And he's doing what he needs to show me lessons as well. It's really interesting. We have a conversation about it. Thank
Well,
you.
and I always say, because the sensitive ones are the ones that sometimes when there's two cats and there's one that's being more aggressive towards the other, it's always the sensitive one profile that's, having the weaker boundaries. And it's the betrayal background that's more outward focused. And I always say you want to empower the sensitive ones. So if you find yourself worried about them, you want to kind of sense them, zap their solar plexus and see it expanding with strength and courage, or put some Superman emblem in their
Yes.
solar plexus and just see them feeling courageous.
Yes.
And that they'll feel that energy from you.
I love that. I think that's a brilliant suggestion for people. We actually had a shamanic healing done for Leo a month or two ago, and he had a soul retrieval done. And it was interesting because she shared with me this image of him with this voice coming out and being like a lion and being really loud and proud. And I was like, that is not what he's like at all. He's a little meeper. He's like the girliest, like fairiest little noise.
Right.
And I'm astounded how clear things are now, because I see him as this poor little Leo, this little buddy who, he's had his ear tipped and, he's got a tiny little voice. And actually, like, he's not necessarily, do you know what I mean? That's what I'm kind of showing or putting on to him, I suppose.
Right.
All from a place of love and tenderness, right? All from a place of, I want to hold you safe, and I want to love you with all that I am and make sure that you're safe and you're happy. But actually, I think you're right. It's an opportunity for me to look at myself. And I hope that people that are watching, you're getting, what you need from this. And maybe this is helpful if you've got this relationship with your cats, to have a think about how do you see your cat? How do you view them? Because as Tammy said, there's an opportunity for us all to look at how we view ourselves and how we view them. I find it really profound, just what you've talked about. I feel like I've got like this big light bulb above my head. I'm like, wow.
Good. That's a good thing.
Talking of multi-cat homes, you said about if you've got different relationships and things going on. Katie, we had a comment. I'm just looking to the left because my phone's here with the comments. A lot of people have said hi. Artie said hi. It's so lovely to see you and have you back and hear about emotional wounds. Big heart for Artie. Katie said she's interested to hear how the mirroring works in multi-cat households with all the kind of mixed personalities and things. Are you able to expand a little on that for us?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And Artie, it's good to see you again. And so when there's, and of course, there's multiple people in the homes a lot of times too, right? Especially with the mirroring. So this is complex, right? So the key is that when you're looking at the animal, what you're tuned into is what they're mirroring for you. So like, for instance, in my former marriage, we had this wonderful dog that I saw was just this peaceful, kind, patient dog. And my former husband would always say, oh, he's just so stubborn. And he's so this, and I never saw him as that. So you want to see what is triggering for you or how you're seeing them. And that's usually the part of you that is being mirrored. And we all have some of each one of these 5 profiles. So they're not just one profile. We usually have about 2 different ones that we're trying to really heal in this life. And work on healing that are up for us, that are more wired in our spiritual DNA. But there's some of all of them. So if you have multiple cats in the house and you're seeing different personalities, I mean, sometimes they're symbolically representing something. Like if you have 2 animals that are fighting in a moment, all of a sudden they switch and you're watching them and they start doing this thing. Check where you are in your thoughts in that moment, because you could have been having some internal conflict, or beating yourself up, and they're trying to give you some message, even when they're sometimes even throwing up. I know this sounds strange, but I mean, it can absolutely be where you're trying to move something out in that moment. And that when you do, your animal instantly feels better. I had a client that said, this animal is like, I have a cat that's just beating his head against the wall. And I go, well, do you beat yourself up a lot? And they just started crying, and said, yes, I do that all the time. I said, well, then here's your opportunity. And like the cat just stopped doing it then. So when there's multiples in the house, they're going to be mirroring different things for different people in the house, and I hear this all the time, that the cat is one way with this person and another way with their spouse, or another way with the child. And it's because they're automatically, they're so incredibly amazing. They're going to instinctively be working on whatever contracts they signed up for with that person.
Yeah. You've just done a brilliant segue there into soul contracts. So I was going to say, I know we were talking about the wounds and how people can identify them. Let's just talk a little bit about soul contracts. So this, again, something that I was drawn to read your book because I firmly believe, and had before I even read it, exactly as you mentioned, that we sign up in spirit with, animals and humans to learn lessons to help our souls grow and evolve. But I ask you to talk a bit about how this comes to be with our cats. How can, I don't think this, but how can just a pet, be anything other than just a companion? How can soul contracts and being aware of them affect our relationship with our cats?
Oh, I love that question. So being aware of the soul contracts, and there are, I'm sure there are many more than what I, found. I'm more psycho-spiritual in nature, and I wrote about 7 different types of soul contracts, the emotional wounds just being one type, but I think it's probably the most substantial type. But being able to become aware of the types of soul contracts will get you out of fixing. In the first book, I talk about a place I call Crazy Fix-It Island, CFII, where something's happening with our cat, and we're like, just what can I do? How can I fix it? How can I fix it? And you fix it first by pulling your energy back and getting off of Crazy Fix-It Island, and then seeking these higher purpose for their messages. And the contracts are always there, even the ones that are in the moment contracts where they're showing us something. But these deeper, and there's all kinds of different levels of contracts. So with one at the Pinnacle teachings, at the 7th one, the top highest vibration is the one that we're all familiar with. And that's where we're learning unconditional love, or we're learning grace and peace and acceptance and forgiveness, and these things that animals emulate in ways that humans can learn so much from. And as we are able to have more compassion because our animal showed us compassion, that's one of the contracts. That's a type of contract. So sometimes just knowing that, oh, they're here to teach me that, then you can go on to the next learning with them. There's so many levels, and there's so many different things that we're learning. And so becoming aware of them allows them to help you grow and evolve and heal in ways that I don't believe animal lovers would without being aware of them.
Yes. So I'm just going to show up to the camera for people. There's a gorgeous little diagram in the Soul Contracts book where Tammy talks about the different types of contracts, and she mentioned, you can have more than one with a cat and animals. And I must admit, I knew that Pickle, the cat that came before Leo, she was everything to me. She was my inspiration. She helped me to create Naturally Cat. She guided me to do different healings to help her to get well. And it was really interesting because when I read your book, I'm going through it, I'm like, yeah, we had that one. And as I'm going through, I'm like, oh, do you know what? I think later we had that one. And then, and it was interesting to see. I always knew that we were meant to be, from the very first day that we got her from the rescue center. And my relationship with Leo, as you would expect with all animals, very, very different. And I could relate a lot to the book with thinking about Pickle, because I guess maybe it come before. Whereas when I tried to think about Leo, I was like, well, maybe it's that one, or maybe it's that one. And it's interesting because I think if I read it again now, because I read it 2 months ago, I'd probably think even more, and be more aware of, actually, no, I think it is this one, or I'm trying to articulate really badly.
You're doing great.
That our relationship with our cats can change and evolve. And as you said, the soul contracts that we have with them, the healing that we experience with them is a journey, and day in, day out, we might get to the point where we're functional with them and we are, literally get up, feed them, litter tray, etc., because you get in that mindset with day to day. And I'm really, especially through my social media, trying to help encourage people to be more present, because when we come into the moment, we can see, as you quite rightly said, what are they trying to teach me? What are they trying to show me? What are they actually reflecting and mirroring back for me to grow? And I ask everybody that's watching, tonight, to have a think about, I say, come into the moment. What can you connect with? What can you see about your cat? And, use some of Tammy's words as well. Have a think about what relationship you have with them. Where can you help them to grow and you to heal? And if you haven't already, you've got to get the books, because I think the teaching in them is everything that I think our soul knows, but actually to have it written in the book and to be able to kind of read it, you've set it out so logically, so beautifully in terms of helping people to understand how to break it down, how to look into it more. Because, if you think about, we've got some cat guardians watching who are a little bit spiritual, they know that they're connected, but don't know more or how to involve or invest in that more. I love the fact that particularly the animal soul contracts, and I'm sure that the soul healing will do the same. It gives people the capacity to understand their own cat and to look at how they can deepen their relationship by identifying what's going on between them. Would you agree with that? Do you think that the books are kind of an opportunity for people to look at their own cat and to look at how they can, support each other?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, it's, I would actually start with soul healing for someone that hasn't read either of them, just because it lays the foundation for your relationship and beginning to teach you how to pull back and look at your relationship differently. And then, of course, as you know, Animal Soul Contracts goes into much more esoteric, the bigger picture of the soul, the life of the soul. And of course, do whatever you're drawn to do. But I believe that at least that's why I wrote them. I wrote them because I could see, as I journeyed with my cats, the difference that it made when my level of awareness was enhanced in their health. And that's will always be so important to me. And when something's going on with them, I know I have something going on with me that I'm working through. And we're not perfect, of course. So we do the best that we can. And of course, our cats are going to have issues that come up as we have issues. And some of them, of course, are going to be theirs. And those of us that get closer emotionally to our animals, that's when there are more soul contracts then. That's when you're going to be able to identify and see more contracts. Those that are more detached, the people that are more detached with their animals, or maybe their animals live outside or whatever, it doesn't matter. Then it's just a different type of relationship. Mm-hmm. But for those of us that maybe learned, I know in my past, I definitely have a big part of myself that says people aren't safe. And so we call in and we get closer to the animals because they're much safer to love. Mm-hmm. And then the spirit says, okay, so let's use the animal for your growth. Yeah. And of course they're growing and evolving as well. Mm-hmm. But it's fabulous when you can be awake for what the journey is, and because it can be easier and filled with so much more grace and love than I never, I didn't know was possible before, because I had more of a codependent type relationship with my animals in my 20s and 30s. I was more in that needy one role and had needy one animals where there was abandonment that was up, and they were responsible for my happiness much more than now. I can look back and if your animals are responsible for your happiness, that's okay. That's where you are. But as I knew more, I didn't want to have them I wanted to be responsible for my own happiness. Mm-hmm. And so my relationship with Bodhi and Rumi, my two kitty cats now, is different than it was with my past cats. Yeah. It's just different, and they're more independent as well. Mm-hmm. And we have more fun. We play so much more, and yet we're not codependent on mm-hmm. each other. Mm-hmm. for our happiness. We're all very unique and independent. So it's kind of interesting to observe that.
And it's lovely to hear that as well, that, you know, as you've evolved, your relationship and your perspective with your cats has evolved as well. And like you said, if people are in that space where their pet or their cat gives them that happiness with that codependent relationship, that's exactly where you're meant to be right now. You know, we don't strive to be like other people. You are where you are, and that's exactly where you're meant to be. So don't feel any form of comparison or, you know, judgment. You know, everyone is on such a beautiful journey, and you know, you are learning and getting the information that your soul needs at exactly the right time that it's meant to be. Like, you know, Tammy said, she's managed to shift her awareness, and therefore that's changed her relationships. And I think I'm probably like a bit behind that, because I'm shifting my awareness. You know, Pickle was my everything. We did have that very, very codependent relationship. I remember when my granddad died, I wanted to come home. My husband and I were actually away, and I needed to come home, needed to be with her. I didn't want anybody else. I needed to be with her after the grief of losing a human, you know. But now with Leo, it's almost like we're finding a way to love each other, like you said, in a very different way. And I think, as you mentioned, I'm becoming aware of what I need to do to make me happy and to find my joy. And then when I do that, then we seem to then evolve a bit more, and our relationship will morph and change a bit. Whereas with Pickle, it was like, I got to be with her like all the time. You know, I find it fascinating how that happens, that we evolve and our relationships change. It's astounding.
Yes. And they, you know, and even in my ties, the kitty, my soul kitty, even in his final years, I was very aware that I was codependent with him. But I was like, well, it is what it is. I'm going to take it while it's here. And I can't imagine a greater teacher of love for me. And it's really, if you want to look at it psychologically, it's really that our inner child has that relationship with them.
Absolutely.
You know, and in a way, and learning and healing in a way that our inner child did not get from a birth mother, potentially, you know, very early in our lives. And so these animals kind of come in and take on that role. And so I get all the time where people will say, I want to call back in the soul of that animal, that cat, because I want that, you know, warm and fuzzy and up in my face, and they love me no matter what, and they want to be with me 24/7, and that felt so good. And they say, but I didn't get that in this cat. And I say, because you don't need that anymore. Now you're ready for the next level of learnings, and you don't have to have that. You can still call on that animal all the time, and they'll be there. They'll even do pop-ins. Hopefully that's not too woo-woo for your people.
No, Karen, say about that. Tell about that.
Okay, yeah, they'll sometimes, those animals that have passed will actually kind of pop in for a moment into a current cat, and you'll know it when they're there, because all of a sudden they'll act like, you know, which is out of character for that cat. They'll act like one of your past cats, and you'll know it. So, which is always fun, but they can be there, of course, anytime that you call upon them. It's just a different relationship, of course, not the same. But it's trusting your soul's process, because I believe that we line up these relationships. And so I believe that, and I have found that time and time again. So if that's the case, then the animals that are in your life today are exactly the teachers that you designed and wanted in the moment. Yes,
thank you. The beautiful words. And that's exactly how I feel. Thank you for saying that. I think that's beautiful to share with people. I can't believe it's nearly 7:45. We've been talking for 45 minutes. So thank you. Before I wrap us up, I'm just going to ask if anybody's got any questions. So if you've got any particular questions for Tammy or myself, drop them in the comments below. So whilst we give people a few minutes to do that, Tammy, can you share with people about your masterclasses? Because I am going to be talking to you about the November one that we mentioned via email. But I really want people to be aware of, you know, not just where they can find you, so mention your social media, but also the extra support that you give. So, you know, you've got your social media and the books, but there are these masterclasses in between. And I think, you know, in fact, I know there'll be some people in my community that will be interested to learn about those. So could you share about that for us?
Great. Yes. The masterclass that I always recommend taking first is on these 5 core emotional wounds. It's called Healing the Emotional Wounds of Animals and Their People. And so I get into that in depth. And I think if anyone that has, I think most people that have taken it would say, yes, that it really was a good tool and resource, to really help them have a new level of awareness. So that masterclass, and I do have one in November. I'm starting, it's just on 2 Sunday afternoons in a row. And I tried to start it earlier enough for people in the UK. I know it's still making a little bit of a late night.
It does.
I know, but usually I do them evenings Eastern time. And I thought I'm going to start them. I think one's at 1 or at 2 p.m. Eastern, which is still like, I know, in the evening time. But I'm hopefully people can get some sleep the night before and stay up a little bit later till like 11 or 12 anyway.
Yeah.
So I do have that in November. And then next year, I always do the Healing the Emotional Wounds of Animals masterclass 2 to 3 times a year. And then I also have the Animal Human Sacred Soul contracts. And I have one starting next week. I'm pretty much full on that one. If there's a weird case, but I know it's not necessarily the right time, but I do record all of them. But I will be doing those next year, and I'll put those dates in place. So yeah.
And what's your website?
It's TammyBillups.com.
Lovely. And you are on Facebook and Instagram?
I am Tammy Billups Healer.
Lovely. Where can we find the book? Yeah, I got mine from Amazon, Charlie. So head to Amazon or a local, any online like book repository or whatever will have it. What else? Very interesting. Thank you, says Nina Marie. Sarah says, so good to hear someone else vocalize this.
Yay.
Artie says she's figuring out her little kitty Hazel. I think with kittens it might take a while as well, Artie, so just be patient. Katie said Eris, which is, I know Katie's got a multi-cat home. Eris is her pickle, like you mentioned about the soul cats. Rachel says, great conversation, love this, so true. Also, we forget the mirrors are also the beauty we see in our animals. That's absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
They definitely do high fives when you're able to recognize the golden light that you see within them is within you. Great point. Whoever said that. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, that was Rachel. She's is another awesome animal person. She does zoopharmacognosy, so self-selection. She does a practitioner course. Very animal focused, and very much like myself, and I know others that are watching, it's about giving the animal a choice and giving them a voice. And I can't thank you enough, Tammy, because although I know your books talk about animals, and actually the kind of the bit behind that is the humans, and we need to look at ourselves. But I've talked so much about cats, and how we can give them a voice and speak up for them. And I love the fact that you've been able to come on this evening and say that, it's us, that we can heal and we can grow and we can love. And actually that will also influence them and benefit our cats. And I think that's a different kind of voice. And I'm really grateful that you've been able to hopefully give people some form of awareness of themselves. And even if it sparked some form of inspiration or interest, that people will investigate a bit further and just deepen their relationship in whichever way that's meant to be with their cat. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. This has been so much fun to get to talk about my favorite topic, and emotional wounds and soul contracts. Yay.
Thank brilliant.
You and thank you for all the work that you're doing, Julianne. I mean, you're doing extraordinary work and you're making such a big difference in the world. And I'm just so grateful to you.
Oh, thank you, Tammy. Likewise. I mean, I would love to have you back again. I think when we started talking before the live, we have so much that we could share with people. And, thank you very much for your time this afternoon or this evening. Everybody's saying thank you. It's been lovely. Thank you for what we've talked about. One last question from Cynthia about what age will their healing or soul mission start to reveal to us?
Well, it's, when they're kittens, they're not really into themselves for, they maybe about a year, they start developing their own personality, but they could, it could be at any time. Mm-hmm. But from what I've seen, about a year is when they're settling into their contracts more. But there's always more. There can be symbolism contracts that happen very early on as well.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you. Well, I'm going to wrap us up because I think we could just keep talking, and I've got like other questions about me and Leo, and I think what I need to do is to take some time with both the books when I'm away and reflect on myself rather than thinking about what he needs. Maybe think about what I need and how that can help him. So again, thank you so much, Tammy. Thank you to everyone that's joined us live. We've had quite a few people join us. Thank you for the comments and the questions. And if you're catching this on replay, if you've got any comments, tag me or Tammy, and we'll try and answer them as best we can. You can find both their books on Amazon or any other book retailer. And as Tammy mentioned, she's on social media, Facebook and Instagram. And her website is tammybillups.com.
Yes.
tammybillups.com. Lovely. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Tammy. It has been such an honor, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Love to you and Leo.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye for now, everyone. Bye, Tammy.